cold with the wind, 5 to 9 Celsius, and when you add on the wind, well, you can take off a few degrees for the wind chill effect. A lot of cloud for Scotland and some patchy rain clearing the far north of Scotland, but otherwise it's mostly a dry picture. And for many places, it's a fine end to the week. There'll be no fog forming on Friday night, but there will be a lot of cloud feeding in and further showers into eastern and central areas. Clear spells to the west will lead to a touch of frost in places first thing Saturday, but the frost won't be widespread because of the extent of the cloud and because of that breeze helping to stir things up. It will be particularly gusty along the English Channel coast as well as the North Sea coast, and both these areas will feel cold because of the wind direction. The wind will also bring in further showers into the east, and also there'll be a spell of more persistent light rain affecting the northwest of Scotland. It'll be mild in the far northwest of Scotland, 9 to 10 degrees here. Elsewhere, 7 degrees typically across the UK. And when you add on the wind, it'll feel more like 4 or 5 degrees on Saturday and feeling more like 0 to 3 degrees on Sunday as that wind picks up and we get even colder air. But at this stage, any showers will be composed of rain.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Deebs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes & Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes & Kerr.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by 2 of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Good morning, you're watching and listening to GB News. This is Friday morning with Esther and Philip. And have we got lots coming up for you today? Yes, we have. Have the politics of envy returned?
Well, I certainly think so after Keir Starmer launched an attack, didn't he, at private schools at PMQs this week, so we'll be asking that question. Plus, a brand new report says medical cannabis should be used more. But is it a gateway to drugs? We'll be speaking to the authors of that report.
And later in the show, we're joined by controversial former MP George Galloway to talk about the state of the SNP. And as ever,
falling apart, they are falling apart. Those SNP.
We'll see what George has to say. And as ever, we want to hear from you today. So if you want to get involved, email us on gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet us at gbnews. But before we start with all of that, here's the latest headlines with Bethany.
Thanks, Esther and Phil. Good morning. It's 1 minute past 10. I'm Bethany Elsey, bringing you up to date from the GB newsroom. Labour has retained the city of Chester in a by-election. Former leader of Chester City Council, Samantha Dixon, is the winning candidate. She's increased the party's majority by more than 4,000 to almost 11,000. The contest was triggered by the resignation of former Labour MP Christian Matheson following complaints of serious sexual harassment. He denies the allegations. Labour's deputy leader, Angela Rayner, says voters in Chester are concerned with the state of the economy and said they want a Labour government.
They're angry with the Conservatives who have crashed the economy, that there's sleaze that's engulfed them, the constant bickering, they're not being able to get Britain moving again. Everyone feels like it's a constant backlog and they're damaging our economy and they're damaging people's prospects. And the people of Chester, the city of Chester, have given a huge message to the Conservatives that they want change and they want a Labour government.
A committee of MPs is warning the reappointment of Suella Braverman as Home Secretary sets a dangerous precedent after she resigned for breaching the ministerial code in October. Ms Braverman was forced to step down from Liz Truss's cabinet after sharing a sensitive document from a personal email. Rishi Sunak gave her the job back 6 days later when he became Prime Minister. The Public Administration Committee says the system for upholding standards should be more robust. 2 teenage boys have been charged with the murders of 2 16-year-olds just a mile apart in South East London. Kern Solanke was stabbed in Thamesmead and Charlie Bartolo was found with stab wounds in Abbey Wood last month. Despite efforts by emergency services to save the pair, both teenagers were pronounced dead. The Metropolitan Police said the boys aged 15 and 16 will appear at Bromley Magistrates Court later. The Defence Secretary says the Army has been neglected over the last 20 years. Ben Wallace made the comments in an interview with the Sun newspaper a week after the Chancellor announced the defence budget will remain at least 2% of GDP. He said $24 billion is being invested into the Army's equipment programme, between now and the end of 2030, but the Army needs to catch up. The King has donated £1 million to hundreds of food banks and community groups across the UK, helping to provide fridges and freezers. The £1 million investment will see at least 800 white goods distributed between now and the spring. Food banks without adequate cold storage have to turn away fresh or frozen food. Charities are experiencing unprecedented demand, but also fewer donations amid the cost of living crisis. Ukraine says between 10,000 and 13,000 of its troops have been killed so far in the war against Russia. The remarks appeared to be the first estimate from Ukrainian officials since late August, when the head of the armed forces said nearly 9,000 had been killed. Last month, America's top military general estimated Russia had lost 100,000 soldiers, with Ukrainians probably losing a similar amount. Cornwall is set to benefit from a £360 million devolution deal under new government plans. The government says the proposed deal will require a local consent and parliamentary approval, which would give the country a locally elected mayor and greater say over transport budgets, building and several other areas. The leader of Cornwall Council welcomed the move as a big deal and has urged the public to welcome the opportunity. And Sir Elton John has been announced as the first headline act for Glastonbury Festival next year. Organisers say it'll be the final UK show of Elton's last ever tour, making it the mother of all send-offs. The star said he couldn't be more excited and that there's no more fitting way to say goodbye to British fans. The music event will return to Worthy Farm in Somerset in June. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now let's get back to Esther and Philip.
Thank you, Bethany. And we're delighted to be joined throughout the show today by editor of Conservative Home, Paul Goodman, and Daily Express political correspondent and environment editor, Steph Spiro. So great to have you here. But I thought we'd start off the top of the show to talk about that by-election last night. If anybody knows about the figures, the stats, what happens, what it means, it's Paul, you and Steph. Starting with you, Paul.
Well, the headline is it's really bad for the Conservatives, the worst result, I think, in Chester since 1832. But there's something that's not been picked up this morning that's really quite interesting and provides them with a glimmer of light, which is that the swing against them, it's like half that of the Blair year by-elections, right, roughly. So Blair had a landslide. What these figures would suggest is, yeah, there'll be a Labour majority, but not a landslide, and the feeling is less one of huge enthusiasm for Keir Starmer than quite a lot of apathy with politicians all round, I have to say. So if Rishi Sunak can just get that swing down to about 10%, he's actually got a fighting chance of a hung parliament. So I'm not saying it's good news for the Conservatives, but there's a chink of light there somewhere.
Steph, predictable. Everybody knew that Labour would hold on to it. It wasn't anything new, but do you see it as positive there as Paul?
I think, as you say, it's not surprising, the result, and it's definitely concerning. I think in the coming months, Rishi Sunak is going to have to reinstall that confidence in voters and make sure that it gets across to the public that the Conservatives are the party of choice, and that's going to become increasingly difficult, especially after the last few months.
Well, people are billing it as a bad result for Rishi Sunak, but it's not really his bad result, is it? I mean, he inherited this mess, and all the polls show that he's more popular with the public than the Conservative Party. This is a Conservative Party problem, really, more than a Rishi Sunak problem, isn't it?
Absolutely, 100%. And it's just unfortunate that Rishi Sunak is the face of that brand right now. So you're absolutely right. Although it is being declared as Rishi Sunak's first electoral test, it is actually a test of how the Conservatives are being viewed by voters right now.
Although, having said that, Paul, your Conservative Home Cabinet League table came out this week, and Rishi Sunak and Jeremy Hunt were plummeting down it at a rate of knots, weren't they?
Rishi Sunak needs to come out fighting in the new year, because this result was pretty bad. I mean, just for the viewers who don't necessarily know, I mean, our Cabinet League table at Conservative Home, it's Conservative Party activists voting each month on where they think the ministers are. And last month before this, Rishi Sunak was somewhere near the top and Jeremy Hunt was in the middle. This month, Sunak's near the bottom and Hunt's in negative ratings. Why? Well, there's only one obvious answer, which is we've had the autumn statement, and Conservative activists and members generally really feel under the cosh from high inflation and from tax rises. So this was a kind of cry of pain. Having said that, if you look at, as it were, polls of the public, Rishi Sunak is sort of pretty popular, so there may be a mischievous case for saying maybe he should set up the Rishi Sunak party, leave the Conservatives behind and kind of run on his own. I don't know if either of you would care to join him.
No.
Just thought I'd check.
And I don't think he'd want to do that, to be perfectly fair. Well, I take the point, Paul.
So stay with us, and because next, Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer has attacked the government's policy of allowing tax benefits for private schools and launched a personal attack on the Prime Minister himself, who attended the elite public school, Winchester College.
Labour's pledged to charge private schools VAT. And Keir Starmer asked the Prime Minister this week if taxpayers' money would be better spent on rifle ranges in Winchester or driving up standards in his birthplace of Southampton. So we're now joined by Julie Robinson, the Chief Executive of the Independent Schools Council. Julie, thank you for joining us. So, I mean, some people might say, well, Keir Starmer's got a point. Why in all these tough times, people are having to pay more tax? Surely private schools should be doing their bit as well, and that his point about money for rifle ranges in Winchester might strike a chord, might it not?
Well, actually, he's got that completely the wrong way around, because disadvantaged areas of Southampton are already benefiting from independent schools. And as Rishi himself said in PMQs, the independent school parents who work really hard to do what they can for their children deserve the choice. You're talking about being the party of choice. They deserve to be able to choose good education, which then takes pressure off the state. And also, these big schools like Winchester, they're doing great partnership work. They're providing bursaries. The sector's existence itself is supporting this taxpayer by saving $4.5 billion every year, educating children privately, and also providing capacity and specialism. So there's a knock-on effect across the whole country's ecosystem of education, where we've got a really positive part to play.
Julie, were you surprised at the attack launched by Keir Starmer in PMQs? Did you know it was coming, or were you surprised by it?
I'm surprised that such a small issue that affects, let's face it, 6% of children's education in the country has become such a big deal. And I have seen it described as an ideological attack. So I'm assuming this is playing on those old-fashioned stereotypes of what independent schools are, which I do feel is really, truly unfair, because the typical independent school in this country is just a few hundred pupils with really striving, hardworking parents doing the right thing for their children. Far from being a problem, these schools are providing extra capacity and specialism, like special needs specialism, by schools like LVS Hassocks. They provide a really helpful aspect of the country's education. So to bash them in that way, assuming they're full of only wealthy children, really is unfair. There's an awful lot of good work done with the disadvantaged directly by our sector.
And if this sort of VAT tax was put on your schools, if your charitable status went, which of the private schools would disappear? How many and which ones?
It's really difficult to say, because it depends on each family's ability to pay, how they are adapting to the cost of living crisis, and how schools can handle it locally. But it'll have three main effects. It would affect the right for parents to choose, because certainly children would be priced out and then would have to move into the state sector in some kind of pattern. That would make the disadvantage gap worse in the state sector, because it would create more competition in local state schools. And it wouldn't raise money anyway because of this student movement. So yes, it would be damaging, but the extent of the damage is really, really difficult to calculate, I'm afraid.
I mean, have you done any kind of survey to show how many parents would no longer be able to afford private school fees if VAT was charged on top? Have you got any handle on that at all?
Yeah, there was a survey by Baines Cutler, which was an independent report about the effect of VAT on school fees. And that was based on parental earnings, family circumstances. This is quite a long time ago, actually. It's before the cost of living crisis. And so that collected data that suggested the thousands of children who would be priced out would eventually create a shortfall for the Treasury of at least 400 million by the fifth year. So we are talking thousands and thousands of children.
Julie Robinson, Chief Executive of the Independent Schools Council, thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning. Steph, I mean, what do you make of Keir Starmer's assault on private schools? I mean, I'm sure, you know, do you think it plays well with potential Labour voters?
I think it's an opportunity for Rishi Sunak to show voters that he's proud of defending the right to choose and to limit tax rises for his voters. I think it's, as you said, Keir Starmer attacking that generational privilege. And as we heard there from Julie, it is going to have a huge impact on Treasury in years to come, and it will price out that middle-class parents who aren't sitting on this vast built-up wealth, and that's absolutely going to have an impact. But it's an opportunity for the government to differentiate themselves from Labour there.
I thought, Paul, I wondered if this was a political mistake from Keir Starmer, because I'm sure if you were to ask people as a policy, it probably polls quite well. But I just wondered if it just reinforces the view to people that actually, you know, this is the typical Labour Party attacking sort of aspiration. It's the type of thing that Corbyn might do, whether or not it actually... certainly, it's not something that Tony Blair would have done, is it, if Keir Starmer's trying to follow that path into power?
I mean, perhaps he's got a focus group somewhere that's told him this stuff's popular, I don't know. When I saw it, I wanted to know what on earth he was thinking of. I mean, he could be asking about prices, he could be asking about the NHS, he could be asking questions about policing, and he goes on this. So it seemed utterly baffling. I just wondered, one of your colleagues put this idea to us yesterday, if he's trying to get Rishi Sunak off going on about education in the new year, because it is something Rishi Sunak's quite interested in. You know, he's got his own story to tell of being brought up in comparatively modest circumstances. Sure, he then went to a very good school and went on, but, you know, he's got a pretty good story to tell. Is Keir Starmer trying to somehow get him off that by just attacking the fact he was at Winchester?
Or is it, you know, because I'd say this was a lurch to the left, this is somehow placating the very left of the party. So is it a thank you to the trade union arms for coming out and causing all of this industrial action? I mean, you're certainly balancing up, aren't you, the Angela Rayner's here, the trade union arm, because to me, this is so 1970s.
Also, it doesn't really make any sense. I mean, one of two things must happen if Starmer does what he's saying he's doing. One, all the kids go off into the state sector, which would then have to have the problem of educating them when it's not particularly well resourced. Or the schools just bump their prices up and the parents pay, in which case that's the end of the cooperation between the state sector and the independent sector. You want more of that rather than less.
What I was trying to get to the point of, Julie, who would still be able to afford it or not? What you'll have now is total polarisation.
Absolutely.
The really wealthy can still go. You squeeze out the middle classes who are desperately forgoing holidays, different things to send the children there. And you're quite right, typical Labour hadn't thought about the finances. It's something like 600,000 children you'd have to find education places for. And these parents pay twice in a way. You get bumper money from them, don't you?
Absolutely. I think it stands to be seen whether that policy actually comes through. And I think I saw suggestions today in the newspaper that the business, under Labour, business rates would also increase for independent schools. So, yeah, time will tell how that one plays out.
But do you think Keir Starmer is feeling a bit vulnerable on his left flank? Do you think that he felt he had to do something to keep those people on board? Do you detect any unhappiness on the left of the Labour Party with Keir Starmer?
Being a political correspondent and in the House of Commons all the time.
I just wonder if he felt he needed to throw them some red meat.
I think so. I think gearing up towards 2024, Keir Starmer's going to have to keep all sides of his party happy, and absolutely throwing a bone to the left side of the party is going to help him in the long run. But time will tell whether that policy carries through.
Because for a while, people will be saying he's sort of saying he was Tory in all but name. He was sort of moving across, wasn't he? Moving across, trying to obviously take Tory votes. So this is something that he needs to do.
It could be. I think it may be that there's some focus group element somewhere or some political ploy in attacking Rishi Sunak that none of the rest of us can see.
So you think this was more about attacking Rishi Sunak than attacking private?
I think it may have been. It may have been. It's certainly a theory of some of your colleagues. It's a way of trying to put him off going on education and making the Conservative case for education and coming back to that in the new year, maybe. I don't know. I still find Starmer going on this at Prime Minister's Questions when there's so much really serious stuff going on in the world pretty puzzling.
Paul, Steph, thank you very much. Coming up after the break, we'll be looking at the latest census, which shows that the UK is no longer a Christian majority country. What does it mean? Does it matter? Let's talk about it after the break.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8". My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 10:22. Lots of you getting in touch.
Peter says, will the Labour Party build new schools to cope with the additional influx of thousands of children having to switch back into state schools? Not all parents who send their children to independent schools are wealthy. Many families pool their resources to enable their children and grandchildren to attend those schools. A large increase in fees will take this option away.
And Nicola said, Sunak inherited the Tory mess. Let's not forget he was in the midst of the mess and he's going to lose every election going forward.
Wow. Marianne said, Chester's been a Labour constituency for many years. There was an increase in the percentage of the vote, but that's not a surprise under the current state of play.
So keep those views coming in. All very pragmatic, aren't they?
Absolutely.
All to the
As
point,
always.
spot on. Now, we finally got access to the full picture of the 2021 census data this week after the Office of National Statistics released a breakdown of our changing demographics.
A census takes place just once a decade and provides an invaluable snapshot into modern British life.
Here to give us their thoughts on the census is the research analysis and culture writer, Dr. Rakib Bashan, and Professor of Politics and Economics at King's College University in London, Jonathan Portes. Hello to you both. So if I go to Rakib. So, Rakib, so does the decline in those identifying as Christian and the sort of changing sort of profile in certain cities like Leicester and Birmingham, does it matter?
Well, I think that we can see here that, in my view, the primary cause of the decline in Christian identification is primarily down to the rapid secularisation of the white British mainstream. In the 2001 census, over 7 in 10 people in England and Wales described themselves as Christian. That's now down to 46.2% in the latest census data. I have seen some questionable takes suggesting that this is the result of recent large-scale immigration. I would actually argue the opposite. I would say that immigration is one of the main reasons why the Christian faith is being kept alive in certain parts of England, including my hometown of Luton. You'll see that there are Black African and Eastern European migrants which have recently arrived in England, which are very much filling the pews of churches and renovating churches in many urban parts of the country. So I think that some of the discourse surrounding the declining Christian identification has been somewhat questionable.
And Rakib, I mean, in terms of the cities where the racial profile has changed to such an extent now that white people are a minority in those cities. I mean, do you think that matters, or I mean, is the levels of integration of those cities more important than the actual numbers?
Well, I think that, Philip, we have to make a difference between white British and white overall. I think that what was very interesting that came out of the most recent census is that the white other category, which primarily consists of people of Polish and Romanian origin, that's increased from 4.4% in the last census to 6.2%. So there's an important differentiation to be made there. Of course, we now live in a country which I would consider to be more ethnically and religiously heterogeneous society. So that means that may well bring challenges when it comes to social cohesion. We saw the recent disorders in Leicester. So I think that policymakers and politicians, I think they should use the new census data as a catalyst to really scale up their efforts to cultivate social solidarity in more diverse parts of the country.
Jonathan, if it is an issue, what can government do, or what should the government do about this?
Well, I think the first thing is to say that I entirely agree with what Rakib has said. And let's be quite specific that when Nigel Farage said that London and other big cities were minority white, he was lying. And it's, you can read that on any number of fact check sites now. And I'm sure you didn't mean to, Philip, but we shouldn't repeat these falsehoods. And I also agree entirely with Rakib when he says that, you have racist commentators like Douglas Murray, for example, who's appeared, I think, on your channel, or Andrew Pearce, suggesting that the decline in Christianity is down to immigration or the growth in the Muslim population. And that quite is simply false. And we need to reject what Rakib quite rightly described as these sort of reheated power-like narratives that you get from some commentators, including on this channel. So I think,
Jonathan, that's why we've got you on this morning. So if you want to answer the question,
thank you. So
if there
I think
is
the first
an issue there, what could or should the government do about it?
Well, I think this is a task, first of all, not just for government, for all of us. And I agree with Rakib. We heard, for example, this morning on one of your competitors, two local community leaders in Leicester, one Muslim, one Hindu, talking about what they were doing to repair some of Leicester has a lot, and there was a long report from Leicester. Leicester has a lot going for it economically and socially, but it has seen these recent disturbances. And we heard two community leaders saying what they were doing actually to repair some of the bonds between communities in Leicester. And so I think, government can do a lot, but actually we can all do a lot in our communities, in schools, and so on. And again, I'm going to agree with Rakib, who said in his recent article that the UK is one of the most successful multiracial democracies in the world. That's not to say there aren't problems, but actually we've come a long way in 30 years.
Don't you think that's something we should celebrate a little bit more?
Absolutely.
And I don't think maybe as a country we are. And I think we've got a lot to be proud of there, Jonathan.
I agree entirely.
Rakib, I just wondered, these figures, of course, they don't tell the whole picture. So my constituency is in Bradford, which is a very ethnically diverse district and city. What it doesn't probably highlight sufficiently is the levels of segregation there are in these cities. In terms of, it might be that overall in any particular city there might be not a majority of ethnic minorities in them overall, but in parts of them it's very much different. So in Bradford, for example, in my constituency, the Muslim population may be something like 20% of voters in my constituency. Next door in Bradford West, it's nearer to 70%. And the schools in Bradford tend to be either virtually all white or virtually all Muslim. In fact, the only really truly diverse schools in our districts are probably the private schools. Is that not something that's sort of hidden from these figures, but that people should be rightly concerned about?
Well, it's not necessarily hidden from the figures. You'll see from the recent census data that you can check particular neighbourhoods and look at their ethnic and religious composition. Of course, that there are a number of post-industrial towns across northern England where I would consider social segregation to be a problem. There's a variety of factors which feed into that. I've commented many times before that in those parts of the country, what we need greater moral and political leadership to help build those bonds of social trust and mutual respect between different communities. I've lived in Luton all my life, where you had the Butchers of Basra demonstrations and the formation of the English Defence League. But in the post 9/11 environment, the community leaders here, they've really made a genuine effort to develop and orchestrate collective social projects around common goals to help bring communities closer together, which helps to knock down those barriers and neutralise the suspicion of the unknown.
Rakib Eshan and Jonathan Porters, thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning. We appreciate it.
Positive note, they're all agreeing on it.
They were agreeing.
Paul, are you agreeing with that? And do you think the census gave us any sort of information, helpful information?
Well, there were two issues raised there. I mean, one was about religion, which was one thing, and the other was about community cohesion, really, which is another. And the two are related, but they're not the same. Just on cohesion, I represented a seat for 10 years in Wickham that at that point had the largest proportion of Muslim constituents of any Conservative MP. It's probably not unlike what quite a lot of Shipley, Ful's constituency, is like now. I think first, there was quite a lot of segregation. I mean, there wasn't really very much intermarriage. But second, it was on the whole pretty peaceful, and relations were good. And what always threatened to upset it was really this long chain of terrible events since 9/11 and a very small minority of extremists, I suppose mirrored by extremists on the white side, the sort of BNP side, who were trying to destabilise everything. So I think everyone would agree we still need more leadership, not just at a national level, but really at a local level, against extremism within the communities and the churches and the mosques.
Paul Goodman, stay with us. Steph, stay with us. Coming up after the break, we'll be joined in the studio by the authors of a brand new report who say medical cannabis should be prescribed more often. But first, it's time for your latest headlines with Bethany.
Good morning, it's 10:32. I'm Bethany Elsey in the GB newsroom. Labour has retained the city of Chester in a by-election.
Samantha Kate Dixon has been duly elected as the Member of Parliament for the City of Chester.
Samantha Dixon is the winning candidate, increasing the party's majority by 4,000 to almost 11,000. The contest was triggered by the resignation of former Labour MP Christian Matheson following complaints of serious sexual harassment. He denies the allegations. Labour's Deputy Leader Angela Rayner says voters in Chester want a Labour government.
Everyone feels like it's a constant backlog and they're damaging our economy and they're damaging people's prospects. And the people of Chester, the City of Chester, have given a huge message to the Conservatives that they want change and they want a Labour government.
Two teenage boys have been charged with the murders of two 16-year-olds who were stabbed to death just a mile apart in south-east London. In the last few minutes, the Metropolitan Police say they have arrested a third individual. Kern Solanki was found in Thamesmead and Charlie Bartolo in Abbey Wood last month. The Metropolitan Police said the boys aged 15 and 16 will appear at Bromley Magistrates Court later. And Sir Elton John has been announced as the first headline act for Glastonbury Festival next year. Organisers say it'll be the final UK show of Elton's last ever tour. The star said it couldn't be a more fitting way to say goodbye to British fans. You're up to date on TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News. Don't go anywhere. We'll get back to Esther and Philip in just a moment. But first, here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2257 and 1.1654 euros. And the price of gold is £1,468.15 per ounce. And the FTSE 100 is currently at 7,537 points.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Deebs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Welcome back to the show. Lots of you have been getting in touch. Esther, what have you got?
Stuart said, if you could, would you send your children to private schools? We were talking about Keir Starmer's attack at PMQs on private schools and on Rishi Sunak for going to one. Most people would say yes. This being the case, then it is an inspirational target for parents to work towards and therefore means that private schools should not be targeted with the envy politics.
Pat also mentions that. She says this is the politics of envy. He went to a private school, so did many of his own party. What a spiteful policy. This unfair policy really shows his left-wing leanings. Don't be fooled. So quite a few people commenting on
Rod
that.
Stein, hi, is Starmer now going to go down the same path as Blair, be more conservative than Conservatives? It worked before, but not in this instance, so not.
But Martin says he has a slightly different view. He said, I support the idea of private schools, but let's be honest, most children do not benefit from them. If people wish to spend their money on them, fine. I went to school in Southampton and my parents did all they can, but didn't have the money for a private school, unlike the Prime Ministers. Of course, taxpayers should not subsidise private schools, but spend more on state schools to make them the best. So keep those views coming in. We always enjoy reading them. Now, a landmark new report from drug policy think tank Volte-Face has revealed failures in the provision of cannabis-based medicines in the UK, leaving people with chronic illnesses no choice but to risk criminalisation by using drug dealers instead of doctors.
Well, we're now delighted to be joined in the studio by the woman behind the report, Katia Kalutsky, as well as the physician and epidemiologist, Dr. Steve Hadjioff. Welcome to you both. So, it sounds quite alarming. I don't know who to go to first. Katia, I'll go to you first. So, is this genuinely true? How many people now are going to a drug dealer rather than to a doctor?
Well, I think just to kind of lay the landscape of what medical cannabis looks like to date in the UK, medical cannabis was legalised 4 years ago in the UK, but since then we haven't seen a massive uptake of prescribing amongst clinicians. Less than 1% of doctors that could prescribe cannabis are doing so currently. And we've got about 20,000 patients that are prescribed legally, whereas about 1.8 million people that are self-medicating illicitly on the market. On the illegal market, that is. And what this report's really looked at is trying to understand what the limitations are to medical cannabis prescribing currently, why doctors don't feel comfortable prescribing confidently, and what we can do to make cannabis, be more mainstream and seen as a
But if
legitimate
they're
medicine.
the doctor and they know their patient and they've decided not to do it, maybe there is a reason, a medical reason not to do it, because you're very much of the stance you'd like cannabis legalised full stop. So you're coming from that angle. This is the bespoke doctor for this patient.
Well, I think what we've seen is the way in which cannabis was legalised medically in the first place. It was legalised through a sensationalist media campaign that was extremely effective and successful in changing the legislation. But I think the way in which it was legalised in the first place made doctors quite sceptical, and it's quite an uncommon way to see a medicine legalised and rescheduled. And I think up until this point now, the last 4 years, the industry and the sector has been trying to educate doctors to feel more comfortable and understand, the benefits of medical cannabis.
Steve, you wrote the foreword to this report. I mean, do you think that some doctors feel a stigma in terms of prescribing cannabis, that they feel there might be some kind of backlash if they were to do so because it can be seen as controversial?
Look, I think there is a role for stigma, but I think there are broader issues there. Doctors are used to prescribing what they know is the best for that patient, what they know is safe for that patient, and what is the most appropriate in that instance for that condition that the patient's suffering from. And we don't have that data yet. For cannabis, and what the doctors who were interviewed in this report have said quite clearly is that it doesn't matter whether we're dealing with a compound that comes from a cannabis plant or from a chemical plant. It needs to be tested in the same way. We need to prove safety. We need to know that it works, who it works for best, and who it doesn't work for. And then it's just like any other medicine.
But would you be happy to prescribe cannabis?
Would I prescribe, cannabis flower to be smoked? Personally, no.
And why is that? Because that sort of goes to Katya's point. Do you need, to understand it a little bit more? Are you just waiting for the facts to come forward? What makes you a little bit reluctant to?
No, look, I think maybe if it was in a really, really extreme case where someone had nothing else to turn to, then I might. Or if it was one of these oils for one of these children with this horrible intractable epilepsy, then of course I would. But what I'm interested in is how we get every doctor comfortable with prescribing medicines. And we're used to prescribing medicines where there's one thing in it and we know what it does, we know it's been proved to be safe, we know it's been proved to be effective, and that's when I'll be happy, is when the majority of doctors are happy.
Katya, I just wondered, is maybe one of the issues is that maybe doctors also agree, or some of them agree, that cannabis can be a drug that leads people as a gateway to harder drugs, and therefore don't want to set them down that path.
Yeah, well, I think, like many other medicines, cannabis is very similar to other medicines in that lots of drugs that are prescribed can have, risk and potential of abuse. But, when you look at the evidence, and in the report, many doctors, especially pain specialists, felt more comfortable prescribing cannabis than, say, opioids, and saw cannabis as a potential means of harm reduction.
Did you think we'd be further down the line, the fact that it was sort of legalised, that you could prescribe it 4 years ago? Are you surprised how slow it's been with the uptake with doctors?
I think that everyone, when they saw, especially advocates in 2018 when it was legalised, expected that, within a few years we'd have hundreds of thousands of patients, but that just hasn't been the case. And I think, what this report's trying to do is that in order to be patient-focused, we need to be clinician-focused, and we need to listen to clinicians, understand their concerns and limitations, and take those head on and tackle them so that we can see prescribing when appropriate.
Steve, Lorraine, one of our viewers, has emailed in to say medicinal cannabis is in synthetic form, so not even as effective as cannabis for medical use, rather than recreational use. She doesn't think it's a gateway drug, but is Lorraine right about that it's the medicinal cannabis is not as effective as ordinary cannabis for medical use?
I think that's a really, really interesting question, and it's a complicated one to answer, because there is evidence around medicinal cannabis. I'm not saying that there haven't been trials conducted, and some of the trials have shown that wider plants or whole plant extracts work better than just isolating a specific compound. But we need to understand why that is. There's a number of potential reasons for that, and actually that's another area of research. We don't want to be in a baby in bathwater situation. We do have evidence. We do have trials that show that some cannabis products in some indications are really effective, and we should encourage prescribing where appropriate in those areas. But we desperately need to do the research and get it right.
Absolutely do. And certainly what we don't want is people thinking they should have got cannabis when they didn't, and then going to a drug dealer to try and get it. That would absolutely serve nobody's purpose whatsoever. And that was a good comment there by one of our viewers. So thank you very much indeed there, Dr. Steve Hadjioff. Thank you very much, and Katia Karolinski. Thank you very much indeed. Now, British prisons are at a crisis point due to overcrowding, with the Ministry of Justice being forced to ask for the use of 400 police cells to accommodate inmates.
It's the first time in 14 years the government has had to take emergency measures like this, and it sparked a debate on the lack of capacity to house criminals.
To discuss the situation further, we're now joined by the president of the Prison Governors Association, Andrea Albert. Hello. How are we at this point? How are we here?
Well, I think there's a combination of things. You know, government policy is that they will be tough on crime, so they've employed 20,000 extra police officers, which clearly means more criminals are going to be caught, which means that we're going to have more people in prison. I think the very steep rise that we've seen in the last few months is probably down to a combination of things, including ramping up after the COVID, the Criminal Bar Association action, and kind of trying to get through the court some of those. We have a record-breaking number of remand prisons at the minute, 14,700. So it's a combination of many things. And I think the important thing to say is that, unfortunately, capacity hasn't kept up with the rise in the population.
So, I mean, is the solution a simple one, Andrea, which is to build more prisons? That's what presumably most of our viewers will probably be thinking when they hear this.
And you'd want...
And I'd agree with it personally. I mean, is that not just a simple solution? Let's build more prisons.
Well, the government have earmarked £3.8 billion to build 20,000 extra prison places. So if we fill them, then we will have a prison population of 100,000. But I think it's important that prisons, they aren't just a place to put people who've been punished by the courts. They have to be a place of rehabilitation. And to rehabilitate people, to reduce reoffending, to make our public safer, costs a lot of money, and our prisons are not funded to do that. We can't recruit and retain enough staff, so we're giving very austere regimes. So in actual fact, we're doing the exact opposite. We're probably brutalising people because we are delivering very austere regimes.
What's the solution in the short term, though? I mean, obviously, it takes time to build more prisons and more prison places, and the crisis is immediate. I know the last Labour government, they just decided to let people out early when they were in this situation, I think 14 days early from their sentence, and changed the rules so that everyone was automatically released halfway through the sentence. Is that what you would advocate this government does? Or because most people were horrified by that at the time, or other people might say, well, why don't they just live in overcrowded conditions, tough?
Well, OK, if you want to just keep people in overcrowded conditions and it's tough, yes, it will be tough, but we won't reduce reoffending and we will not make the public safer, because those people at some point, or the vast majority, will have to be released. Our position, the Prison Governors Association position, is that only the most dangerous criminals who we need to be put in prison to protect the public. There are other things that we can use rather than put people in prison that are as effective on being tough in crime. Things like using technology, GPS tracking, so people can serve their sentence at home. Remand population, there will be people who are currently remanded who will not get a custodial sentence. Why don't we identify who they probably are and give them strict bail conditions? There are options that are open to us that actually mean that we will still be serving the public and protecting them.
I see there are other options open, but at the moment, when you read in the paper and you're hearing about violent crime, you're hearing about attacks, I think most of the law-abiding public would rather they were locked up and rather more prisons were built, though.
Well, you can say that, but the end result is that if they're just locked up and we don't do anything with them, we will be releasing them and there will be no better than when they went in.
Oh, yeah, do something when they're in there. I'm not saying don't do rehabilitation too, but what I'm saying is they'd sooner want them locked away separately and get rehabilitated, and that's what we need to do, and have honesty in sentencing, going back to your point, Phil.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just slightly surprised, Andrea, that you sort of have, as the head of the Prison Governors Association, you have such little faith in prisons. It seems to me you're sort of rather advocating that people shouldn't be sent to prison, and you're the head of the Prison Governors Association. I thought you'd be the one advocating how wonderful, what wonderful work prisons do.
I'm not advocating that we don't send people to prison. What I am saying is if we are sending people to prison, they should be the most dangerous, so we protect the public, and we should be able to do something with them when they are in prison. As it stands at the moment, our prisons are overcrowded, they are not funded, we do not have enough prison officers to deliver decent rehabilitative regimes, so they are not working.
Andrea Albert, President of the Prison Governors Association, thank you so much for joining us this morning. It was very good of you to do so. It's a really interesting discussion, isn't it? And I'd be interested to know what our viewers think about
Phil, I mean,
that.
You've done so many freedoms of information on this subject, full stop. When Andrea there was talking about, oh, we only want the most sort of dangerous of criminals in prison, it takes an awful lot to actually get into prison. How many offences on average do you have to commit to get into prison?
It does take a lot. I did some FOI requests, as Esther said. Actually, statistically, when I did them, if you committed 100 offences and you went to court, statistically you were still more likely not to be sent to prison than to be sent to prison. So it is difficult to be sent to prison, and I think let's build more prisons.
And a lot of people now are feeling there's dangerous people out on the street, as I said, with the violence that we're seeing.
We can't just let people out willy-nilly because we haven't got enough prison places. That can't be a solution.
Anyway, moving on. Lady Susan Hussey, a close friend to the late Queen and godmother to Prince William, has been forced out of her palace role after offending the charity boss, Ngozi Fulani, by asking her where she really came from.
Here to discuss further is Grant Harold, a former royal butler. Grant, there's different camps of opinion in terms of this. Some people say that it was terribly offensive and it was awful and it shouldn't have happened. Some people say that what she said was it was misguided, but she was only trying to be friendly and no malice was intended. Some people are saying, well, I didn't really see that she said anything wrong at all. Which camp are you in out of those three?
It's really interesting because even my social media, I've also been sharing about what's been going on, and it's turning into a huge debate. Massive debate, and it is, as you said, it's almost like a 50-50. There's a camp for and against. From my point of view, what's really difficult, when I knew Lady Susan, when I worked at the Palace, I know what a kind lady she is. I've never witnessed anything, when people say she's racist, I've never witnessed that, personally. The problem is, when you do that job, when you accompany a member of the royal family, you get the details about who you're meeting, background, and then they normally meet them before the royal meets them. So it's not unusual to kind of ask a couple of questions. It's not unusual at all. This has obviously gone, for whatever reason, has gone badly wrong, which is why the Palace have obviously put a statement, Prince of Wales has obviously put a statement out, and it's highly embarrassing. And I've been speaking to many friends about it who take both sides, and I think a lot of people do feel that it's a bit extreme that she's had to lose a job because of this, but at the same time there'll be people there who feel that's maybe not enough. So it's a really difficult one. But as a friend when I was a friend of Lady Susan and knew her, I really feel for her. I really do.
There will be people who say, well, Meghan always said that she encountered sort of racism and casual racism in Buckingham Palace. Does this give greater credence to what Meghan used to say, that people used to poo-poo?
Do you know what's difficult is over the years, I mean, you have to, historically, there has been obviously racism cases, there's been discussions, right down to when a member of the royal family had a brooch on. There's been different discussions over the years. I think nobody can say that I think you couldn't go in there and say, well, there's no racism at all. I think that's an impossibility in today's society, and sadly, there's always discrimination and racism that takes place. I think it's how you address it and how you deal with it, and I think that's the important part for the royal family, because they are now going forward a modern royal family, and it's a big household, huge household, so they've got to be really...
I mean, you know, whatever, you know, and as you say, there's different camps. It was a very unfortunate gaffe. It was wrong, and it was a mistake. But I want to look now, too, following on from what Philip said about Meghan and Harry.
Yes.
They've now decided to release their advert, as it were, for their Netflix sort of series of documentaries. Was this a coincidence? It was dropped at the same time as Wills and Kate being in America, or was this a deliberate, you know, doing it at the same time to knock them off course as they're in the States?
The timing is extraordinary. I don't think it's deliberately done, but you never know. I don't think it's been done. I think the timing.
See, you're such a diplomat, Daisy. That's why you're a butler. If only Lady Hussey had been as diplomatic as you. But seriously, though, looking at it, you know...
It's not great. It's really not good. And I do feel for the Princess of Wales. Obviously, again, I worked for them. I knew them. You know, this is an important reason, obviously, they're shot prize while they're out in Boston. And it has been overshadowed, without question. I mean, you pick up the papers and it's either about, obviously, what's happened at the Palace the other day or about the Netflix programme.
How upset do you think they will be, Kate and Wills, and also King Charles, about the incident the other day?
I think they will be upset, no question, because, you know, that's one thing that they would not want to stand for. They won't want any mistreatment within the royal household. So I think it's good that obviously Prince William made the statement, but again, really difficult for him because Lady Susan is also his godmother, so she is like a member of the family, basically. So it's difficult, but it is important. I think it's really important they do this because, you know, I've always said that the thing about the monarchy is it's important, it's always modern the way it does things, and its approach, and this hopefully continues to show that that's what it does.
What is the relationship between William and Harry? From your insight?
When I was there, they were best friends. They were brothers, they were best friends. When it all originally broke about the divide, you know, when all those statements came out from the palace a couple of years ago, I didn't believe it. I was convinced it was I just thought it was some sort of mistake, and I was basically giving into you saying, no, this will just be a false storm. Yeah, a media storm, false information.
But now it looks like real rivalry. They've got like two different camps. Can you see the rivalry for somebody who saw them as so close?
Oh, absolutely. I can't disagree. I mean, when I look at it, it really upsets me. The only thing that gave me a little bit of hope was when the late Queen passed and we saw them together. You know, I kind of put up a social media post saying the Fab Four back together, being optimistic and hopeful, thinking may this continue. But now this programme has continued to come out. I don't see how this is going to help heal bonds. I mean, obviously we've got to see what it's going to be about, but it's just royals don't really do this kind of thing.
It's definitely upstaging them, isn't it? The photos, what they've released, pictures of themselves, while Kate and Wills have to be quite formal in a way. They're not. Look at this.
I love the headline in the front page of the Daily Star today. Publicity-shy couples share most intimate secrets with 8 billion people. That is for people to...
Meghan and Harry.
Well, I think that sums up perfectly well, doesn't it? Publicity-shy couples sharing intimate secrets with 8 billion people.
Do you think they can come back together, or is this rivalry set for life?
I think, you know, with families, you have fallouts, don't you? You have fallouts, and most families eventually get back together, and they're all family like the rest of us. They're having fallouts, and I'd like to think that one day that they will somehow get back together and get over these issues, hopefully.
Grant Harold, former Royal Butler, thank you very much indeed for joining us. That's it for the first hour here, but don't go anywhere, because in the next hour we're speaking to the controversial ex-MP George Galloway about the state of the SNP. You certainly won't want to miss that.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us. We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing. You see, amazing.
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Good morning and welcome back to Friday Morning with Esther and Phil. We've got lots coming up this hour, including George Galloway, such a case, isn't he? We'll be speaking to him about the SNP because it's all falling apart in that party.
And we're also going to be speaking to Paul Hardcastle. You might remember his classic hit 19. Well, we're going to be talking to him about what makes an inspirational tune.
And Matt Hancock is back. He's in Parliament because he's got his private members' bill today on dyslexia.
You don't want to miss hearing about that either. And as ever, we want
Will he be voted out?
I don't know. And as ever, we want to hear from you today. So if you want to get involved in the conversation, please email us gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet us at gbnews. But before we start with all of that, it's time for the latest headlines with Bethany.
Thanks, Esther and Philip. Good morning. It's 1 minute past 11. I'm Bethany Elsey in the GB newsroom. Labour's deputy leader says it's clear the people of Chester want a Labour government after the party's candidate won in a by-election.
Samantha Kate Dixon has been duly elected as the Member of Parliament for the City of Chester.
Samantha Dixon increased the party's majority by more than 4,000 to almost 11,000. The contest was triggered by the resignation of former Labour MP Christian Matheson following complaints of serious sexual harassment. He denies the allegations. Angela Rayner says it's the worst defeat for the Conservatives in the city since 1832.
They're angry with the Conservatives who have crashed the economy, that there's sleaze that's engulfed them, they're constant bickering, they're not being able to get Britain moving again. Everyone feels like it's a constant backlog and they're damaging our economy and they're damaging people's prospects. And the people of Chester, the City of Chester, have given a huge message to the Conservatives that they want change and they want a Labour government.
A committee of MPs is warning the reappointment of Suella Braverman as Home Secretary sets a dangerous precedent after she resigned for breaching the ministerial code. Ms Braverman was forced to step down from Liz Truss's cabinet in October after sharing an official document from a personal email. Rishi Sunak gave her the job back 6 days later when he became Prime Minister. The Public Administration Committee says the system for upholding standards should be more robust. That's your top stories on GB News. For now, we'll bring you more later.
Welcome back. Lots and lots of people have been contacting us, not least about prisons and people's opinion about whether or not prison works. Rick said, why don't we build dozens more prisons? What a hero, Rick. Well said. If we don't have the prisoners to fill them, all they can double up to house illegal immigrants while they're waiting to be processed.
And Jeff said, giving a masterclass in why prisons don't work. Rehab in prisons is a myth. So he doesn't think that they're getting any rehabilitation in there, so maybe they need to do a bit more.
I think what Dee says here is very interesting. She says they need to build more prisons. Why should people be at home on a tag? She says, my son is a prison officer, and believe me, most of them do not want to be rehabilitated.
Yeah, we've got loads coming in there. I think that's... give us another one, Phil.
Mick says, what evidence is there that prison rehabilitates? We need to lock people up to stop them offending. In fact, it's the only way to stop some offending. I like what Alan says here. Alan says it costs around £35,000 to imprison an offender. Use foreign prisons at a much reduced cost. Saudi Arabia would be quite the deterrent, says Alan. I think he's probably right, isn't he?
Well, we're joined again by Paul Goodman here, thank you, Connor Home, and also Steph Spiro there. Fantastic. So this whole prison debate, do we need more? Lots of people obviously say, yes, we do. It takes a lot to even get into prison, as Phil knows, having done all the FOIs. Would people feel safer if they're in a prison rather than just tagged and out on the street?
Suppose you've got to face the fact that the prison system is kind of like the forgotten part of politics, right? There's enormous coverage of the police, and, you know, if you're a kind of ordinary citizen, you'll be thinking about your security and your families and your neighbours. Not many people kind of think about prison. Well, it depends what the crime level is. But what I think, you know, clearly is the case with prison is somehow you've got to break the cycle of a kind of quite small minority of offenders going into prison, coming out, then re-offending and going back in. And until you can do that, you're going to continue to have the situation with the prison system.
It seems that it's not sending them to prison that's the problem, it's letting them out that's the problem. But I mean, Steph, I'm pretty sure that the old Daily Express readers would be happy to see more prisons built, wouldn't they?
I think they probably certainly would. As you've said, people want to feel safe. I think a key to all of this would be nipping things in the bud at a lower level. So by the time you get to prison, maybe there's been offences occurred much earlier on in the early stages. So grappling with that and getting a handle on that first will take the strain off prison.
Yeah, so a zero tolerance view. You've got to get them in straight away, but you know that's not the case. The problem is, as Steph alludes to there, they've got to become more hardened, or they've got away with it so often that either they're not frightened of prison of being sent there, or for some people who go to prison, it's slightly better than if they were not in prison.
When I went out to with my police, and I said to them, if I asked you to cut the crime rate by 50% in my constituency, what would you do? And the police officer I was with said I'd send the 20 most prolific offenders to prison, all at the same time. That at a stroke would halve the crime rate in the local area. Do you think he's onto something with that?
I wouldn't want to quarrel with the experience of your local police officer, because I'm sure they know what they're talking about. Of course, you wouldn't presumably have them all sentenced at the same time and behind bars at the same time.
Well, the thing is, you see, the point is surely is that the more criminals that are out on the streets committing crime, the higher the crime rate is going to be. Surely the best way to cut crime is to have the criminals not out on the streets and in prison. Surely it's common sense that will cut the
you're taken to court, you're sentenced, and you're sentenced for a time. And after the end of that time, you come out. You can't send someone there indefinitely. I think there is a question, it always has been, it's hung around. I was kind of mystified about why nothing's really done about it, about the fact that sentences don't actually reflect, in many cases, what people are sentenced to. And I do think the public get very, very worked up about that.
Honesty
rightly.
in sentencing, they go in and then they get only half the sentence. And actually people said, but I thought you were getting 8 years for that crime you've committed. And in fact, you've only got 4. And I think that absolutely does upset people.
I should just say that the prison population capacity issues only apply to male prisons. There's plenty of capacity apparently in women's prisons and youth offending institutes. It's male prisons where there's a big pressure on them. I just want to read out some other views because people have been having some views on we've been discussing lots of different issues. There's actually been quite a lot of comment about the lack of Christianity Victor says, traditionally most people claim to be a Christian but are gradually realising they're not practicing Christians at all. Sean says it's not religion that matters now in the 21st century, it's basic human kindness, compassion and intelligent understanding. And Chris said, I think it will be of more use to publish the numbers of people that consider themselves religious rather than Christian. In my view, the drop in numbers identifying as being Christian is due more to people thinking that there is no God, but I expect many suspect there is some kind of higher life form than ourselves out there somewhere. So it's not, you know, it's quite interesting, isn't it, that people still have belief even if they're not Christian.
Yeah, I think most people do. Now, I know we're waiting to get George Galloway up. He's shocking with his timekeeping. You know him very well, Phil, and he's shocking. But he was on to talk about, as it is at the moment, the big story within the SNP, which is a complete sort of destabilisation of it. Paul Goodman, did you know how bad the sort of infighting were, the sort of radical sort of nature of the SNP at the moment and foisting out the Westminster?
One of the things that struck me most as a political journalist, and will strike you as politicians representing English seats, is that since devolution, I think, Scottish politics has felt like kind of quite a long way away. And what goes on in Scotland isn't always easily perceivable from London. You've got 4 parties up there rather than 3. It's hard to see. So I've not really been across these rows within the SNP, though I know that George Galloway will have something to say about that when we find him.
Well, I think it also becomes interesting now because we keep saying, Nicola Sturgeon only brings out the independence card all the time. There's so much she could be getting on with education, policing, crime, whatever it is, but she keeps bringing out this independence card ever she's in a pickle. Now, I wonder now, is this for her or is this just to shore up her party? So she's forgotten her voters. This is all about remaining in power, keeping a grip of her party, and that's why she keeps doing it. I thought it was, maybe for the country. It's not. It's for her, completely.
It might be Nicola Sturgeon's got a goal. She wants to stay in power and keep pushing that agenda. And I guess people are willing to do what they need to do to ensure that.
What insights have you got into the splits within the SNP in Westminster? When they first came in en masse, they were a very tightly knit group. They never sort of spoke out against each other or voted against each other. But they do seem to be getting a bit more fractured at the edges, and there seems to be certain issues like I know the trans issue seems very, very controversial with the SNP. Are they more fractured than we think? Is this the first sign of that, really?
I think so. I think there is some infighting there, and I think those signs have been there for a while. There have been allegations of, for instance, sexual misconduct, and that kind of came out. And so I think there is party infighting. And
right, well, we'll come back to this SNP story a little bit later once we've got a hold of George Galloway. Anyway.
The Prince and Princess of Wales' visit to Boston for the Earthshot Prize has been overshadowed by another royal race row and Harry and Meghan's announcement of their upcoming docuseries where they're expected to talk about their experiences stepping back as working royals.
Our royal reporter, Cameron Walker, sent us this report from Boston.
Despite a royal race row and a Sussex docu-series on the horizon, the Prince and Princess of Wales focused on their passions yesterday, visiting local organisations that support their communities. Perhaps an engagement that encompassed most of Will and Kate's interests was Roker, which has supported vulnerable young people for almost 35 years. Roker's founder explains how Will and Kate are helping to break stigmas.
They both individually and collectively have a real interest around a range of mental health issues, early childhood, addiction, youth homelessness, and working with emergency response workers. They've really sort of leaned in on this. How do you destigmatize mental health? How do you help people get access to resources?
I met with young men supported by Roker. 22-year-old Jonathan was jailed for an attempted robbery, but Roker's support has helped him turn his life around.
They was definitely on me to change, challenging my thinking ability. And even behind the walls, I was going through a lot of things I was thinking. So it was a challenge that I overcame.
Matt's childhood was difficult and he was taken away from his parents by the authorities. Roker's helped him cope with past trauma.
From a year ago till now, I'm a complete different person. I got my head on straight, I got the right goals now, so I'm doing the right thing.
Kate had the opportunity to focus on early childhood development with Roker's Young Mothers programme. Like the Princess, Sunindya Bala, who runs it, believes the first 5 years of a child's life are crucial.
I'm so thrilled that the princess is interested in this area because it is a really important time in a child's development. And yet what we know about the families that we work with is that in order to break that cycle, in order to make sure that children thrive, we really have to stabilize their mothers and help them.
A quick dash across breezy Boston was Will and Kate's opportunity to see firsthand how the city is remaining optimistic about climate change.
The doom and gloom approach to climate change really isn't very helpful. So we really want to think about what the opportunities are and how we can all come together to address this.
Boston's a city showing the world how to adapt to a changing climate and sea levels rising. This living seawall behind me is an example of just that. It not only protects the homes behind it, but also absorbs the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Will and Kate have learnt all about it. Today, Hollywood A-listers joined the Prince and Princess on the recycled green carpet for the Earthshot Prize. Prince William uses his global platform to help others. Others appear to use theirs to talk about themselves. Cameron Walker, GB News, Boston.
Well, we've just got some breaking news here. It seems that Sajid Javid, a former minister of various departments, is going to stand down at the next election. We've got Paul Goodman here, so editor of Con Home, so we'll be asking him about that. How many people are standing down?
To Sajid standing down, I think it's very much part of a pattern, which is this, that not so long ago, if you'd been a senior minister, you hung around in the Commons and you gave your colleagues the benefit of your views. This is actually quite useful to them and useful to the government, whoever the government was. Now they're going faster, and you can sort of start to understand why, because you can't go off and be appointed chairman of a select committee because it's elected. Your outside interests are more restricted than they were. You're quite young. People are going to go, and it's speeding up. I think it's a shame because Sajid Javid's got a lot to offer, but it is part of the story of our times.
He's off, but what I was reading, Boris Johnson is staying here. So there you go. But anyway, Ian Blackford has been ousted as SNP Westminster leader in a major blow for Nicola Sturgeon, who considered him as a close ally.
Although he denied being forced out, SNP insider said he had to resign after it emerged Stephen Flynn, the Aberdeen South MP, had the necessary support amongst the party's 44 MPs to oust him. Joining us now is former MP and leader of the Workers' Party of Britain, George Galloway. George, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. What's your reading of the situation with the SNP at the moment?
Well, as Mr. Churchill said of the famously ugly Ian McCardo, Ian Blackford's not as nice as he looks. And for some, it will be an occasion of sadness, but there's great rejoicing in Scotland. He was a cringing embarrassment to the country. His bloviating, blowhard, bullying manner, whilst claiming to speak for the people of Scotland, was very greatly deprecated here, and quite rightly. It's not the kind of people we are. The SNP is beginning to come apart at the seams, I think. It's fin de siècle, end of an era, the Sturgeon era as the Salmond era before it, coming to a close. She'll be lucky if her successor doesn't try and put her in jail as she tried to put Mr. Salmond in jail.
So do you think this makes Nicola Sturgeon's position more precarious as well as leader of the SNP in Scotland?
I think she's just waiting for the right international job offer to come along and she'll be gone. That's the meaning of all these meaningless, otherwise, trips abroad, selfies with foreign leaders and pretensions on the international stage for a variety of reasons, some of them personal. I think she feels it's time to go. The bitter blow of the Supreme Court refusing them permission to have a kind of self-announced referendum marks the end of an era. It's a punctuation mark. Of course, the Scottish separatist cause will not go away. It might even benefit from a change of leader. There are many, many people in the SNP, after all, who think that Nicola Sturgeon's taken their party as far as it can go.
Yeah, I was going to say that whilst the SNP seems to be imploding, it seems to have support for their mission within the public.
Yes, I mean, I'd caution you against the latest poll, which puts them ahead, because most polls put them behind and almost exactly to the point of the referendum in 2014. I do think that Scotland is divided roughly 55-45. And that means, therefore, that not only will they not get a referendum, but if they did get one, they would lose it. We would win it again, and probably by the same number. That's not the problem, Esther. It's that it's worse than that. It's that we're locked in a never-endum, where all politics and all media, for that matter, is about what I call the national question, and none of it is about making the buses go better, making the health service operate better, the schools, the social services, the drugs death crisis. We're the drugs death capital of the world, and I include the Bowery and the Bronx. The reality is Scotland is going downhill fast because we're locked onto this hamster wheel, this never-endum, and we can never get off it. They can never get independence, but because the unionist parties will not unite, they're more concerned about being king of their own anthill. They continually get a majority in the Scottish Assembly at Holyrood. And also, in terms of local government, some key councils like Glasgow, my old stamping ground. So we're locked into this. It's actually worse than independence, being neither one thing nor the other.
Definitely in purgatory there. Now, George, can I ask you a completely different question? And that was, what did you make of Matt Hancock in I'm a Celebrity?
I didn't watch any of it.
But what do you think of a politician?
I understand he did better than anticipated, although whether he had some friends operating the phones 24/7 voting for him, I don't know, although I've seen that speculated.
You're such a cynic, but politicians going into these shows, you were in Big Brother, is it a good move for a politician to go into these shows?
Well, it was a good move for me. I walked out the door and on to Talk Sport with the mother of all talk shows, which almost 20 years later is still running, but this time to an audience of millions. In the last 10 days, 2.59 million people have watched all or part of my show. Even better than your numbers, Esther.
Oh, I don't know. I think we're going head-to-head there, George. So what are you saying then? Matt Hancock will be going out of politics
what I'm
and
saying,
into
Esther,
the media.
is that you asked me on here to speak about Ian Blackford. So I kind of don't appreciate 3 questions on Matt Hancock.
Oh, George, we gave you lots of times and you've spoken a lot about SNP. I said, could I ask you, or I'm going to move to something completely different. And you're so able to speak so eloquently on your feet. I was pretty convinced you could take a question on a light-hearted question, but obviously you didn't want to.
One, but not 3.
Fair enough. George, thank you so much for joining us. We do genuinely appreciate it, and we do genuinely appreciate your insight into the state of the
But
SNP.
what he more or less said there was he thought Matt would be going into the presenting world rather than the political world. But back to the story there about Sajid Javid standing down there. Were you surprised there as the political correspondent for the Express, Steph?
I think, and as you'll know, sitting MPs have until the 5th of December to confirm whether they are going to be stepping down in the next general election. So I think in the coming days, there's a very real possibility that we're going to see a wave of MPs announcing that they're not standing. Alarm bells should be ringing within the party, though, because several people that have already announced they're stepping down are relatively young. So we've had Dehenna Davison, she's 29, William Rags, 34, Chloe Smith's 40, all relatively young people who are at the start of their careers. So I think alarm bells should definitely be ringing within the party.
I'm shocked by that, to be perfectly honest, about Sajid Javid. I didn't see that coming. Anyway, coming up, we're discussing Matt Hancock's dyslexia bill as he makes his return to the House of Commons today. Don't go anywhere.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio or online, every morning it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
We're still chuckling here over George Galloway not wanting to get into I'm a Celebrity. That's because he was on, what was this, Celebrity Big Brother. Lots of you getting in touch about the different stories about prisons in particular. Charles said reoffending rates are around 35% in UK prisons. Military prison, Colchester, is 2%. There's a lot to be said for discipline. No TV, march everywhere, kit inspections, 4-man rooms. Discipline's what he's saying.
Well, there's a lot of hardliners contacting us. I thought I was hardline on crime, but Mark says, bring back hard time, make prisoners pay for their crimes and incarceration with hard labour. Marion says, the sentencing needs overhauling. There's no rhyme or reason. I agree there should be an attempt at rehabilitation, but prison should not be a pleasant place to be. It should act as a deterrent to committing crimes.
A lot of people think that, don't they? It shouldn't be somewhere that you can, you know, make sure you've got meals, make sure you've got a telly, make sure you're playing pool.
There's also been lots of comment about Lady Hussey losing her job over the event at Buckingham Palace. I'm trying to... I think Mick pretty much sums up the majority of opinions here. Mick says, Lady Hussey, an elderly lady doing her duty, was stitched up by a political activist and after 62 years of loyal service has been thrown under a bus by a cowardly royal family. I'm very disappointed. And quite a lot of views very similar to that coming through.
But former minister, and I'm a Celebrity contestant, you know who that is, Matt Hancock, is back and in the news again, thanks to his private member's bill on dyslexia being debated in Parliament today.
Mr Hancock has discussed his own struggle with the disability and first introduced the bill in June. To discuss this bill further, we're delighted to be joined by the CEO and founder of Made by Dyslexia, Kate Griggs. Kate, thank you so much for joining us. Can you tell our viewers, in particular, what this bill, if it was successful, would do that Matt Hancock's bringing forward today?
Sure. The bill is asking for dyslexia screening for all children in primary school, and currently 80% of dyslexic children are leaving school without their dyslexia identified, so that's super important. And it's also calling for teacher training for all teachers. So both of those things are really, really vital to support the 1 in 5 kids who are dyslexic in our classrooms.
That might be Matt Hancock himself on the phone, telling you. I mean, what's the view, Kate, on whether or not the government's going to accept Matt Hancock's bill? Do you know whether this is something that you're pushing at an open door with, or whether it's going to struggle to get through?
I honestly don't have an insight into whether it's going to get through or not. I think either way, the government need to act now. If it does get through, fantastic. It means that there'll be more debate through the consultation process. And if it doesn't get through, I think it's a disgrace. I mean, dyslexic children at the moment are being left to fail at school. The consequences of not picking the children up and supporting them is really, really serious. I mean, there's a huge number of dyslexic people in young offenders institutions, pupil referral units, and even prisons where it hasn't been supported, it hasn't been spotted, and they're leaving school unable to read and write. So whichever way, the government needs to act fast and act now. And there's lots of very free or inexpensive ways that they can support. They just need to grasp this issue and deal with it.
Do you think Matt Hancock did raise the issue of dyslexia on I'm a Celebrity? Were you pleased in that regard that he went on that programme?
I think it's an interesting way of raising awareness, but to be honest, it's probably why we're talking about it on the TV today, and we've had so many requests for interviews. So it has raised awareness, yes. I think it's a shame he didn't mention it a little bit more on the programme, but, who knows? It's in a reality TV, that could just be in the edit. So, yeah, interesting, but, we're here today, so it's a good thing we're raising the issue. I think the most important thing is what happens next, and whether we actually do get some proper support for dyslexic children, because we've known for over 100 years how to spot it and how to support it. It's just not happening in our schools, and it has to change.
Kate Griggs, Chief Executive and founder of Made by Dyslexia, thank you for joining us this morning. It's the third bill on in the House of Commons today, and so we'll know by 2:30 p.m. whether or not it got through to the next stage. So we wish you well with your campaign. Thank you for joining us.
I wanted to bring Paul in here because, lots of people would have been anti Matt Hancock going in the jungle. It's a dereliction of duty, he should have been at home. But here he is, come straight back from it, and now got his private members bill. Fabulous timing. I mean, you couldn't have actually planned that. Is it going to help him? Can he survive on the back of this to be raising such an important point?
He's got his bill, but looking to the future, he's got to get re-selected as a Conservative candidate by his local association to stay in the House of Commons. If he can't do that, there's been, speculation this week, I see, that he might be Conservative candidate for the Mayor of London. Now, honestly, what I think about this is that George Galloway had a point. If you listen to George was talking about his move from politics into basically journalism. And I look at Matt Hancock, and I think he's really kind of what we used to call in the parliamentary party, Phil, on a journey. Right?
He certainly is.
From politics to the strange world of celebrity.
I just think there could be a backlash to Matt Hancock if the bill doesn't go through today, which it may not, and people might say he should have been here trying to argue for his bill rather than being in the jungle, and I suspect that's the problem he'll have. Anyway, coming up, we'll be getting stuck in to all the thrilling World Cup action so far and asking, is it coming home? Well, that's after your morning headlines with Bethany.
Of course it is.
Yeah, we'll see.
Good morning, it's 11:33. I'm Bethany Elsey, bringing you up to date from the GB newsroom. And we'll start with some breaking news. Sajid Javid has announced he will not stand again at the next general election. The MP for Bromsgrove was the Health Secretary until July this year, when he stood in the Tory leadership campaign. He's also held other cabinet positions, including Chancellor and Home Secretary. In a letter to the Prime Minister, Mr Javid said serving the government had been the privilege of his life and that he hoped his best was sufficient.
Kate Dixon has been duly elected as the Member of Parliament for the City of Chester.
Labour's deputy leader says it's clear the people of Chester want a Labour government after the party's candidate won in a by-election. Samantha Dixon increased the party's majority by more than 4,000 to almost 11,000. The contest was triggered by the resignation of former Labour MP Christian Matheson following complaints of serious sexual harassment. He denies the allegations.
Everyone feels like it's a constant backlog and they're damaging our economy and they're damaging people's prospects. And the people of Chester, the City of Chester, have given a huge message to the Conservatives that they want change and they want a Labour government.
The RMT union boss is holding urgent talks with the government in a bid to halt planned strikes over the Christmas period. Mick Lynch met with Scotland's Transport Minister yesterday, who've urged Westminster to intervene in the Network Rail pay dispute. Speaking on his way to meet Rail Minister Hugh Merriman, the RMT General Secretary said the offer must be meaningful.
We haven't had a structure in which we negotiate. They've never put an offer on the table. So hopefully, either today or over the weekend, they'll start to do that, and then we'll have to take that back to the union, see what they come up with. Well, they're definitely moving. It's definitely different to it was over the last 6 months. There's no doubt about that. But we've got to find out whether it's meaningful, whether it's just, window dressing.
On TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Don't go anywhere. We'll get back to Esther and Philip in just a moment. But first, here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2279 and €1.1656. The price of gold is £1,456.91 per ounce, and the FTSE 100's at 7,544 points.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Deebs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Well,
Welcome back, 11:38. Lots of you have been getting in touch. Mark said, we were talking about private schools and if that sort of mask has slipped of Keir Starmer pretending to be Tory, but really as a socialist, he says, if Starmer thinks that removing tax breaks for private schools will gain him votes, then surely, in the light of the latest census highlighting falling numbers of Christians within the ethnic British population, he should extend his removal plans to include the preferential tax position of places of worship.
Been lots of comments about the census on declining Christianity. David says, could it be as simple that the Church of England has shot itself in the foot with its constant wokery and spouting almost non-Christian views? It certainly drives us away. And Rob said Christianity is on a downward decline because we have the worst Christian leader ever. The Right Reverend Justin Welby should be preaching from the Bible and filling churches rather than becoming a political preacher. So quite a few strong views about that. Just interestingly, on the story about cannabis, we were talking about medical cannabis earlier. Yeah. Nick said, I have a friend who was given 6 months to live, suffering with cancer. He's still here 2 years on due to taking cannabis. I thought that was quite interesting.
It was indeed. And here's something else that's interesting. World Cup drama is in full swing as Germany and Belgium crash out of the competition. The Germans finished bottom of their group at the 2018 World Cup and have again failed to qualify for the last 16.
Not going to be many people here disappointed, given Frank Lampard's disallowed goal in 2010 against the Germans. We're now joined by sports broadcaster Scott Doe to take us through the biggest sports stories. So, I mean, that's pretty big. Scott, Belgium, supposed to have their best team that they've ever had, out. Germany, who everyone just always thinks, well, they're always going to get to the final or whatever.
Yeah.
They're out. We've had a few shocks here, haven't we?
There has been. I mean, of course, we think Germany will get through, but I don't think on a whole they deserve to in the performances they put in. But it also shows really good for the other side, you know, like Japan. I mean, yesterday they were playing Spain and it looked like they was, you know, going to lose half time. And then second half they come out, they were incredible and fully deserved the win. But it is a massive shock, obviously, Germany and both Belgium going out in the group stage.
Did they deserve the win, though? That's the question. Did Japan deserve the win? Look here, for those who are watching on TV, if you're on radio, you can't see it, but we are showing the moment when Japan scored their second winning goal. And I'm not being funny, Scott, but I've seen it a number of times, and that ball was definitely out.
So as soon as I see it, and after I thought the ball was out, and I've been in football my whole life, and I still didn't realise they were saying about it's the whole symmetrical of the ball and not just the ball being over the line. I believe still the ball was out.
It was definitely out, wasn't it?
And yeah, it was definitely out, and
well,
I don't know...
that shot we were looking at there, it shows that it was out.
Exactly, and then obviously they were saying FIFA weren't, you know, releasing pictures to show how they could claim the ball was still in, so the ball was out, but... As we said, I don't think too many people will be disappointed.
Our viewers can see it again there. Let us know. I'm saying that's out. I don't care what anybody else says, actually.
And if you're on radio, trust us, it's
out. If you're listening on radio, it's out.
I was going to say, you know, in Germany, the newspapers have been quite brutal about the football team. The Bill's headline was, how embarrassing we're out. And it said the football world used to tremble in front of us. Now Germany is football dwarfs.
Well, that's happened because of their last two tournaments. And, you know, it's nice for it to not be us for once having that, you know, with the press getting on to England. But their performances for the calibre of players they have, and they also, with Germany, it's not just their experienced players. They have good youngsters as well. And they should have been getting through their group. But I still, regardless of that goal last night, I don't think they deserve to get through it. I just don't think they've done enough to qualify through that group.
So England are doing OK? I mean, now Gareth Southgate's realised he's got Phil Foden in the squad. They're doing they're doing OK. I mean, my view is England's got the best players of any team in the tournament, but probably the worst manager. Argentina are coming to the boil at the right time, I guess. How do you see it panning out from here on in, Scott?
Well, I mean, with the England one, I think now people might look back on that USA game and actually not think too bad because of other teams going out and other results. I don't think that one looks too bad, and USA aren't a bad side. I think going forward, for me, the other team that have obviously most impressed is Brazil. And I just think with Brazil and us, I think we have the two best squads in the tournament. Brazil could play 2 11s. We could technically play 2 11s. We have a very good squad, so do they. Of course, Argentina are a threat, but I think as it stands, things are looking good for us at the moment.
I'm going to ask a question. Now that they couldn't see the wives and family for the first section, and they've got through there to the final 16, now they can. Is this going to help or hinder them? Are they going to come out now reinvigorated and win again England?
I think help, because you get that, the support of the nation, but then when you get your family, it's such. It is, at whatever level, it's a fantastic feeling to know your family are there watching. So for these guys, obviously, at the World Cup, it'll be special. So I think it will help. It's, of course, not an easy game. No game's easy. But I feel like if we turn up how we should do, especially like we did against Iran, I think we should get the win.
It'd help me if you were there if I was playing.
Well, yeah, it would help me if you were there playing.
Scott, thanks ever so much.
No worries, thanks a lot.
We can dream on
we can.
you're an England football player.
Yeah, well, you know.
Anyway, Freed from Desire, Three Lions and Sweet Caroline, they're all examples of classic football tunes.
Do you want to sing them?
No, I don't. And listening to my voice today, nobody wants to hear me singing. And now singer Chesney Hawkes has claimed his song, the one and only, inspired the England football team to beat Wales and reach the knockout stages of the World Cup. And one man who knows what makes a great song is Paul Hardcastle, who is responsible for 19 in 1985, which became a musical anthem of the Vietnam War. So I'm looking at inspirational songs. And Paul, it's great to see you. Can I tell you, that's one of my favourite all-time songs, 19. But wow. Chesney Hawkes there, could he now, he's raised up the England team, could he be raised up and have a #1 hit at Christmas?
Do I think that someone can do that? Well, first of all, I love Chesney. He's a really lovely guy. But I don't believe that story at all. Sorry. Do you know what? I think you should get the manager involved a lot with it, really, because, a manager's takes care of the team and, a producer basically looks after someone that makes records. So I would say that get a manager in. I mean, listen, don't get me wrong. I think Three Lions was a brilliant, absolutely brilliant song, and it was so well put together. I don't think we've had anything as good since. And I know that you're going to come on to something like the Sweet Caroline thing. But that's really only because Jeff Hurst's middle name was Caroline. Did you know that?
No.
Oh, no, I didn't know that. No. Is that true?
Well, if Paul says it must be true.
It's like a game of Call My Bluff, this, isn't it? Frank Muir's going to appear at some point. We're going to work out whether that's true or not.
I was talking to Tom last night and we was just going through a couple of things and I just said it as a joke and he said, "You've got to say that." So blame him. Sorry, Sir Jeff. No, your name's not Middle. His name's not Caroline. But do you know what?
But music can change the mood. It does do something. It can raise your energy, can't it? And that's what we're looking at, inspirational songs.
I mean, as I say, my only one really that has done anything for me has been Three Lions, because it's had some great lyrics and it's meant something. 3 lions on a shirt. Jules Rimet still gleaming. All them years of her, never stopped us dreaming. I don't think you can get more inspirational than that. I think we've hit our peak. Maybe someone should have really, really made it. I don't know. You should have got someone out of Oasis to redo it, or I don't know, just to give it a bit more, I was going to say violence.
Welly, a bit more welly.
Aggression. Well, that's a good one, welly, yeah. No, aggression, that's the sort of thing. But I mean, what's your view? What's your view on it? How do you look at it?
I do believe that, music helps, and maybe we all like to think this, but when I used to watch Liverpool, when they were doing badly, Radio City used to play I Will Survive if ever they weren't winning. Right. And blow me, they'd play that song and Liverpool would come on and score. So superstition, whatever it was, get the crowd behind you.
I agree. Liverpool is a perfect example of somewhere and something and somehow that changes games. Every team knows that if they're losing and you start playing, the song that basically they always sing, it basically just changes the whole atmosphere. And if we could get something like that would do it. You go to Anfield and you know that there's a 12th, 13th, 15th man playing for them. As soon as they start singing that song, it is a game changer. You've seen it with Liverpool so many times. I've never seen it before at a ground. Now, if someone could transfer that into the England type of thing, then I think that really would make a massive difference. I agree with you 100% about Liverpool. That's the only club in the world I think that happens to.
Paul, your big hit at 19. Well, why do you think it was such a big hit? And when you wrote it, did you realise it was going to be a big hit record the moment you wrote it?
I thought it was either going to be something totally different that people. I mean, when I first took it into a record company, it was that's how I got together with Simon Fuller. He worked at Chrysalis and asked me to come in, and I played it to all the hierarchy there, and they sort of all laughed, really. What's all this? And it was saying the points. It was people being killed and blown up and stuff. And what happened was they all basically sort of said, "Thanks, Paul. We'll get back to you." Apart from Simon Fuller, he stayed behind, and he said, "Look, they don't get this. I do. How would you feel me becoming your manager and leaving my job at Chrysalis?" And I was so young with it all. I said, "What does a manager do?" He said, "I just take all the, let's just say CRAP. I don't want to swear in this morning for you." And so basically, he became my manager. 7 weeks later, we was number one in 13 different countries, and that's where 19 management started. The number 19 came from the record 19, so it was 19 management. And Simon went on to become the biggest, most successful manager ever. And he was my best man, my daughter's godfather. So our friendship is still, to this day, it's great.
But Paul, I mean, I remember this song. It was a classic, and it's still now, when I listen to it, it is so emotive. And a bit like you said, the 3 lines on the shirt, the words that went with that, and that you did keep repeating, the 19, can you believe? And you gave facts and figures. The average age of somebody was 19, and all the facts and figures. I mean, it was a poem to music, really.
Yeah, I called it a musical documentary, but you've got a point there. It takes a special person, I think, to write a football song. I couldn't write a football song. It's just not in my psyche to do it. But if you had someone that really did think about it, and there was, all you have to do is look at. Excuse me, as I say, I've got sinusitis. Wonderful. All you've got to do is listen to the cop. Walk on, and as soon as you hear that. There's such a, I've been to Liverpool and watched. I'm a Chelsea fan, and I've been there.
I won't hold that against you, Paul, being a Chelsea fan. But thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning.
That's a pleasure. Thank you very much. Good luck.
Thanks, Paul. Cheers. Thank you.
Oh.
And we're going to end the show as we always do with the latest showbiz news with Sarah Robertson. Sarah, did you know the story about Simon Fuller and Paul Hardcastle and where we got 19?
I didn't, but I was very interested to hear it. Yes, I was watching that very animatedly there, taking it all in.
Yeah, it was very good, wasn't it?
So I didn't know. I've learnt something new. There you are. But since he was talking about music, that obviously leads into what I was going to say to you guys, which is Elton John has just been revealed to be headlining Glastonbury Festival next year, which is very exciting. The fans have gone crazy for this. This is going to be his swan song, though, his last ever tour performance, and he's going to
always say that. Hasn't he said that the last few years?
Yes, but he's been doing this farewell Yellow Brick Road tour, and he wants to end it on an absolute high in England for all his British fans at Glastonbury. He says he's incredibly excited, but it's also going to be very emotional because that's going to be his goodbye from ever touring.
And what a way to go out.
But what a way to go out, and he'll obviously be following in the footsteps of Sir Paul McCartney's killer show, which we saw this year, but I think it's going to be wonderful. And I mean, I've seen Elton perform. I've been at his Oscar parties where he's got on stage on the piano, and I've been right there next to David Furnish, his husband, and listening to him on the piano playing. He is an absolutely superb performer. I just had to drop that.
I wish I could have.
I'm just thinking out as a Yorkshireman.
next to on the piano.
No, nobody as big as that.
Yes, but there's nothing like it. He really is a phenomenal performer.
I was just thinking how much those tickets are going to sell for at Glastonbury.
Well, tickets I think have already sold out.
They're going to be on the black market, aren't they?
Yeah. Yeah, it was
too late.
released.
They've already gone.
Yes.
I know, but there'll be trading
Oh, there'll
somewhere.
be touts and things and people break in. And
he's going to get there by hook or by crook by the sound of things, isn't he?
I'll try and help you.
Not at those prices. I don't think I will be, to be honest.
And Kanye West?
Yes, so Kanye West, a musician in disgrace. I don't think there is any way back now for Kanye West. His comments yesterday were below the low. Elon Musk has just suspended him again from Twitter when he just brought him back. He's had to suspend him again for inciting violence. When the likes of Alex Jones, the far-right fringe activist who we know has been in the news recently for the disgusting comments he made about the victims of Sandy Hook shootings, is shocked beyond belief on his show when Kanye starts talking about how he really likes Hitler and he thinks there's nothing wrong with the Nazis and Hitler had really good things about him. When Alex Jones is visibly and physically uncomfortable and is trying to say to Kanye, you need to rein it in, then you know there's a problem. When the likes of Alex Jones is going, whoa, that's gone even too far for the likes of me, then there's a serious issue. Yes, Kanye went, it was just beyond the pale what he was saying. Disgusting. And then he made comments as well. He displayed a symbol of the Star of David with a swastika in it. It's just disgusting.
What's he thinking then? I mean, what's the matter with him?
Well, he does have...
Is it attention-seeking?
It's attention-seeking, but he, I think, has some sort of messiah complex and is saying that he's doing the work of Jesus and God and that he loves everybody. And it's a very sad state of affairs. Someone needs to stage an intervention now.
But moving on from him,
yes.
the Netflix trailer.
Yes.
Harry and Meghan.
Yeah.
This is the big one. This is the big headline news. Obviously, all the front pages today. Incredible. This is now being seen as a declaration of war on the royals, by royal insiders, by their friends, by friends of the Waleses camp. Second day, big display, obviously, for, big day for Kate and William in America for the Earthshot Prize. And Harry and Meghan and Netflix choose to make that the day that they release the trailer for their new 6-part, long-awaited documentary series. It's seen like something as the Kardashian show, really. It's called Harry and Meghan. So, like the Kardashians, and it's just this reality show, and it's showing all these clips of, Meghan kissing Harry, these behind-the-scenes luck, but it's not gone down very well.
Sarah, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
We'll see you next week. Well, that's all from us, but we'll be back tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. But coming up next on GB News is the wonderful Andrew Pearce, so don't go anywhere.
Hello, I'm Alex Deakin, and this is your latest weather update from the Met Office. Most of us having a dry Friday, just 1 or 2 scattered showers across the east. Still quite misty and murky, still a few stubborn fog patches, and we've got an easterly breeze keeping things chilly, and that easterly wind will last through the weekend as well. It is pushing the weather fronts away, so as I said, most places dry, but in this easterly breeze across parts of eastern England and eastern Scotland, every now and then just a few showers drifting in. Western areas seeing the best of any sunny spells, but we do have, as I say, some stubborn mist and fog patches which may not completely clear. Many places just staying rather drab. And it is chilly. Temperatures only in single figures for the vast majority. That breeze will continue to strengthen in eastern areas as well, still bringing in a few more showers across parts of eastern England this evening, and they'll last overnight. It won't be as foggy overnight, but we could see some thickening of the fog patches in South Wales and South West England, certainly this evening and through the first half of the night. Clearer skies in southern Scotland and parts of northern England, going to allow a touch of frost in the countryside, but most places start the weekend at about 3 or 4 degrees above freezing. Still going to feel pretty cold though through this weekend. That easterly wind will start to strengthen. Quite a few showers, I suspect, over eastern parts of England and Scotland. Some damp weather across the Highlands too. Best of any brightness further west, but most places will keep a lot of cloud during Saturday. And that easterly breeze bringing a chilly feel. Temperatures reading 6-7 degrees for most. Add on that wind and it will feel colder than that. And that easterly wind continues to bring some showers of rain into parts of the east as we go through Saturday evening, and they'll linger into Sunday as well. So again, a few showers around on Sunday, perhaps a few more over northern England on Sunday. Again, a lot of cloud again, and temperatures only 6 or 7 degrees with a strengthening easterly wind. It is going to feel chilly. Goodbye.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here. You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Hello, you're watching Andrew Pearce here on GB News with you until 2 p.m, talking about some of the big stories from the week. Here's what's coming up. A new winter of discontent approaches not just on the railways, but in the NHS too, as ambulance workers, hospital staff and nurses coordinate their walkouts. I'm going to be asking a union boss why he seems comfortable risking patients' lives. And a fresh outbreak of diphtheria in the Manston Migrant Processing Centre. Our Home and Security editor, Mark White,